G'day freedom lovers, Mark here with the North Queensland Freedom Network again. Today we have Senator Gerard Rennick. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks, mate. It's awesome that you come and speak to independent journalists. Who would have thought that in the year 2023 that independent journalism would be where the Liberal Party would come to speak? What would you have normally done that in the past?
Well, it's interesting. I've literally just done a Facebook post on one of the things that I've picked up on this tour is the number of local newspapers that have closed down since my first Senate tour as a Senate candidate back in 2016. And there was a time you could basically just go into any town that had their own local newspaper and you could just walk in and say, look, hi. I mean, I was a Senate candidate back in 2016, but even then, they'd give you a bit of a rap or, they'd at least speak to you, whereas now, there's very few local newspapers left. And I mean, I was told yesterday, and I'm happy to, this may need to be corrected on this, but for example, AIR gets its one paper or one local lift out in the Townsville Bulletin every Thursday, and it's basically 4 pages. So correct me if I'm wrong on that, but AIR used to have its own newspaper, for example, and we really need to keep our voices local. Like everything, democracy and all these things, power should come from the bottom up, not top down. And we are seeing way too many top-down decisions being made by government who in the last 3 to 4 decades is more interested in controlling us rather than serving us.
It's definitely a problem, and I mean, it seems to be a worldwide problem, which brings me to when you were last here, I filmed your presentation. We posted it to YouTube, and so if you're watching this on YouTube, we're probably going to have to cut to Rumble and BitChute at this point because YouTube censored us last time.
And I don't even know what I said at that last meeting. It would have got cancelled. Because it was all a pretty sort of, a lot of it was bread and butter, talking about monetary policy, taxation policy, and just government overreach in general. There was no sort of, we touched on the vaccine and the vaccine mandates being another example of government overreach, but I was shocked when I heard that, Yeah,
I was definitely shocked because, like you said, I didn't think that you'd said anything out of place. You cited medical papers and whatnot. It wasn't opinion, but, I just got a generic, this has been taken down for misinformation. It didn't explain at this time index something was said that went against a standard for whatever reason. It seems to me that we've got foreign companies, which YouTube is owned by Google, interfering in other political realms, like Australia. What do you think we can do to sort of curtail this sort of censorship, I guess?
Well, we need to get the government to actually enable freedom of speech. And if, look, these guys, it is their platform, but if they want to pull our posts down, there was an agreement in the last term of government that these guys weren't considered publishers. They didn't want to take responsibility for what was posted. And I respect that. I don't think they should be responsible for every little comment that goes up. There's billions of comments made a day, but they can't have it both ways. So they can't say, we're not a publisher, we don't want to take responsibility, but then turn around and pick and choose what they don't like the sound of because their advertisers or whoever their corporate masters might be don't like what's being said. So, and secondly, if you do pull a post down, actually be specific about what was the misinformation, because their idea of misinformation may not be our idea of misinformation.
And that's definitely one of the problems I find. They say refer to our terms and conditions, but the terms and conditions are somewhat vague and subject to interpretation. So I guess where we're getting at is there something in motion at the moment in Parliament, or is this something that you yourself might be bringing forth?
We'll have to bring it forth again. Basically, there was something in the last Parliament, as I just said, where the agreement was they aren't publishers and everyone's responsible for their own page. So if that's the case, they shouldn't be censoring information. And it's interesting, they generally only censor information around, in the first instance, COVID, and in the second instance, climate change. So yet again, the cynic in me tends to think that, some big powers. And we actually know with the Twitter files that it turns out that the White House was pressuring Twitter to censor information about COVID that didn't agree with the narrative of the White House. Now, we cannot have, let alone in Australia, but the US as well, a censorship of free speech. And I'll make an exception here, where it's outright abuse. And you're inciting violence. I can live with that, right? If you go out and say, I'm going to pull a gun and, shoot someone, that's bad, right? Don't do that. But if you're questioning the safety of the vaccine, the science behind climate change, whatever. That's not inciting violence. It's not, a lot of this stuff isn't even settled. It's science and debate and the way our country run should be subject to scrutiny. The censorship shouldn't be allowed to happen.
I wholeheartely agree. And it's not like they're taking down flat earth conspiracy theories. Those are still available on YouTube.
Well, that's right. I mean, some of the more, out there stuff, and I mean, whatever, floats your boat, right? But, you can get away. There's a very inconsistent application of the standard. Yeah.
Very arbitrary. Post the last federal election, I spoke with George Christensen, and he referred to the Liberal Party sort of going into a socialism light, where Labor's obviously socialism extreme. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, all government, whether we like it or not, socialism. The question is whether or not the money being spent by the government, the taxpayer dollars, is being spent fairly and efficiently. I would argue there has been way too much big government in the last, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. When it comes to making rules and regulations like driving on the left-hand side of the road, stopping at a red traffic light, yes, I can live with that. But as I said in my maiden speech, we've seen in the last 30 or 40 years government sell all the infrastructure that provides essential services, and then they've marched on into the family home and classroom telling us what to do. And since that speech, they've marched into the doctor's waiting room and they spend a lot of money. And I think that government has got out of control and the spending involved, and we need to work harder, and by we I mean the Conservative coalition. We need to do a better job at holding both the rules and regulations, that centralised control. We need to be looking to empower the individual and restrain the authority of the institutions, and we need to actually, I'm happy to spend in areas where it's genuinely needed, like on building infrastructure, but we should be looking at building, investing in, and by investing I mean building infrastructure that starts to generate recurring income. So I touched on this on one of my posts on the way up regional Queensland, the sale of Queensland Rail, that generated freight income from the coal trains and royalties. Obviously, we still get the royalties, but that freight income from the trains in central Queensland on the coal trains paid for the cost of running rail in the city. So we need to be look at the way governments generate income, and I'm a big believer we should generate a lot of it from actual infrastructure, and then also higher withholding taxes on profits sent offshore, and we should be lowering income tax, and also, and this is one for the companies, but it is an important one, is getting rid of payroll tax, and we paid for that by bringing back stamp duty on share trading, which is a paper asset, and 40 to 50% of the stock market's traded by foreigners sitting on their bots. Like Twitter has bots. You have these algorithms that are bots that are just scalping the market. And those guys don't have to pay any stamp duty, while our farmers, our home buyers, and that do.
No, summed up quite a few of the questions I might have asked in that one. Thanks, mate. Another question, I myself have young children coming home from high school, and they're saying things like, oh, I like this girl, but she keeps saying she's transgender and all these other things, and it's becoming very popular, and a lot of kids are becoming quite confused about what's being said in the schools. I've heard from teachers themselves that they're not even allowed to speak out against this in any way, shape or form, that a boy is no longer a boy, a girl is no longer a girl. We've seen questions posted that have to be taken on notice in Parliament themselves, trying to identify what is a woman. What are your thoughts there, mate?
Oh, it's out of control. I mean, effectively, and the same people pushing this agenda are the same people that tell us to trust the science. Now, look, I don't want to speak to the individual who may have issues about whatever they are feeling, but I do know this, that is not it should not be in the classroom. If my children, for example, have any sort of issues about their sexuality, I will deal with that outside the classroom with a properly trained psychologist, where other children aren't aware of my child's problems. Because what I want all our children, not just my children, to be confident in themselves. I do not want that type of indoctrination put down their throats at the school. For the same reason, I don't want a stripper coming in and doing a bloody lap dance and showing the boys how to, this is what you treat a woman. I mean, it's degrading of women. And I also don't want gender men playing on the sporting field or in change rooms. And this stuff is being forced down our throats, and it's not right. As I said, there's a very, very small percentage of people who have these issues. And as you say, Bo, but if this stuff becomes discussed in the playground and etc., then it could become a fad, that we just don't want that to happen. We want schools to go back to education, not indoctrination, and we want to assert the primacy of the parent over the government and how we raise our children. We do not want, I'm pretty sure I speak for your followers, we do not want the government co-parenting our children. Full stop.
Exactly, mate. Thank you. Within the Liberal Party, I noticed yourself and Alex and there's a couple of other really brave individuals standing up and sort of going against the standard narrative. Are you getting any pushback from your fellow Liberal Party members?
Not anymore, no. Most of them are on board and they voted with a few motions that we've tried to get up and to have a Senate inquiry into COVID. Unfortunately, however, we just, about 3 or 4 people short of getting a majority in the Senate. So, it's the likes of Jackie Lambie now, David Pocock, who are obstructing the way, and of course the Greens and Labor, who don't want to investigate COVID. Now, even when the Morrison government was empowered, we agreed to a COVID select committee while COVID was going on, and yet now Labor in power, they won't do that. And that's typical of Albanese, who said, he was going to be open and transparent. Well, guess what? He's not. So it's not on. I would much rather a Senate inquiry than a Royal Commission. I fear a Royal Commission would be a whitewash. I fear that Labor and the Greens would select judges that would only look at things like, was the vaccine rolled out fast enough? Why didn't we get them sooner? etc., rather than vaccine injuries. So, when there's guys like Alex and myself and Matt Canavan who will go in and ask the questions that I know many of your followers and my followers want to be asked, I fear, I wouldn't say no to a Royal Commission. I just think that the findings would be very biased in terms of, all about the central control. There needs to be greater control of our health rather than less. So, we lack the numbers, long story short. So we've got to actually rebuild, and in many ways, I need to get, we need to start sort of working on being much more strategically, the Conservative movement's got to be much more strategic in order to get the numbers back into Parliament. And then once we get there, to have much more strength of our convictions and intelligence in our own, or confidence in our own intelligence, to actually ask the questions. Because as we know with social media today and the narrative, anyone who does get asked the question is automatically called anti-vaxxer, climate denier, right-wing nutjob, conspiracy theorist, cooker.
Insults.
Insults. And this is not, it's not science. Name calling. It's not even an argument, but, it is intimidating when you have a pile-on. And unfortunately, I think that has scared a lot of Conservative politicians, or it's intimidated them. And, I'll be honest, I get intimidated not so much with Facebook anymore, but certainly on Twitter I've had a few pile-ons recently by the media. You do, I don't get that rattled anymore because I've sort of gone through, I've had a few pile-ons now, but I've realised that, that is now part of the job. 30 or 40 years ago, there might have been one paper a day that would come out and you'd have one 7 o'clock news bulletin at night and then maybe the 7:45 a.m. bulletin on ABC, which I know it was always balanced, but it certainly didn't degenerate into the level of toxicity and disrespect that Twitter and some of these social platforms have. As a Conservative movement, we need to be able to, rise up to the threat that this sort of abuse poses to free speech and critical thinking.
We've got a lot of that sort of coming from, the Labor, Green, far lefty sort of people, and obviously the social media sort of thing. Do you think that perhaps other members in the Liberal Party will continue to follow your lead and return us back to that Conservative values that we've tended to, see the Liberal Party as?
I hope so. I think, and one of the things I say, and I'll say it again tonight, is that you only ever come second when you adopt your opponent's argument. And we will never out-teal the teal or out-green the greens. I think our values are timeless, the dignity and worth of every individual, the importance of the family, reward for effort, and we do care about the environment. And one thing we have to be very good at and improve is delineate the fact that we do care for the environment versus the fact that we don't believe in the junk science behind climate change. And the left has been very good at conflating those two issues, and they're two separate issues. And I think, as many of your followers know, windmills and solar panels and transmission lines and lithium batteries, there ain't nothing environmentally friendly about them or renewable or sustainable. But we've lost a lot of ground. We didn't always stand up for what we believed in, and we've now got to fight back. And the only way we're going to do that is by going back to those basic values and actually having the confidence and believing in them, the strength, the conviction to fight for them.
Awesome, thank you, and I hope that really does take off for the rest of the party. We're starting to see a lot of numbers gather. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I mean, in the past, you would probably go around and campaign in some sort of fashion, but have you ever seen anything quite like this?
Not to see me. I mean, I have seen other people pull crowds like this. I mean, Jacinta Price pulls a huge crowd. But, you know, it's important to make, you know, we've got to convert just that social media following into real action, because, you know, just marching, as we know this, you know, marching around the streets in the city CBD on a Saturday afternoon isn't enough. You know, and as my cousin always said to me, you can't make decisions in the car park, you have to be in the boardroom. And so what we really need to do is to be much more strategic, much more organised, and get into positions of influence. And it doesn't just have to be in politics. It can be in your school P&C or P&F. It can be in your industry group like National Farmers Federation. It can be in community groups or sporting organisations. I was just speaking to a rugby player in Charters Towers on Saturday night about that Israel Folau issue a few years ago. You know, if you don't like it, get involved with whatever the organisation is that you're passionate about, or the industry that you're passionate about, or if it's politics yourself. And actually, you know, go to where the decisions are made and try and, you know, it's the 1% of the 1% that control the decision making in the world. I mean, by all means, you know, like I do try and raise awareness, but you're not going to wake up 50% of the people all the time, because a lot of people are aware, but, you know, they have their own day-to-day concerns. You know, they may have a sick parent, they may have a sick child, they may be working 2 jobs, they may be heavily involved in a community organisation, and politics isn't their thing. They don't necessarily have the confidence to speak up. And that's okay. Like, everyone has their own preferred, stream that they want to row their boat on, and that's fine. But the important thing is to find some area where you think you can add value that will help improve the lives of our fellow countrymen and make sure that there will be future opportunities for our children.
Very well said. I think we've said that on this channel a few times. We need people to get up. You guys that are watching this, don't just sit there with your bag of chips. Come on, come give us a hand, help out where you can. I know I'm doing this all by myself. I've got kids and multiple jobs myself, so yeah. What's your excuse? So, but thank you very much for coming on, my friend.
You're welcome,
it's awesome.
Yeah.
We look forward to seeing your presentation. Stay tuned for part 2, where we will show what the good senator here has got to say yet again, unfiltered, unedited. And look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much.
Cheers, thanks, Mark.
No
Have
worries.
a great night.